the Titans cornerback position. We're continuing our training camp positional preview series here today on the Music City Audible channel, diving into the corners. Can this unit be a strength of the team? What's up with L'Jarius Sneed? And who's the first man up if somebody goes down? We're diving into all of that today. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. And today, Justin, we're diving into the cornerback positional preview here as we gear up for training camp, just under 2 weeks away now. And we've already covered the safety position. We've already covered the tight end position. That was yesterday. Safety's on Monday. So if you missed those, check back in the feed. But today, we're diving into cornerbacks. How's it going?
Doing well. Yeah, excited to talk about this group. A lot of numbers in the room, as I think you learned as you started putting the names together for this episode. Excited to go through it all. Bunch of UDFAs. They cut like 3 UDFA corners already. Like they had even more than they do now. So a lot to talk about here in this group.
Yeah, we got 11 players in the room. I think there are 4 stone cold locks for the roster. At least one more I would call the rookie 6th round pick Marcus Harris, like pretty much a lock, but it's not guaranteed. Okay, 5 locks, but it's not a stone cold lock. It's like the lock is closed, but it hasn't been like frozen in ice. And then we have 4 UDFAs from this offseason, 1 UDFA from last offseason, and a veteran journeyman cornerback that they signed. So we're going to dive into this position, starting with the overview here. So the obvious starters, we don't even have to project this. This is an if healthy scenario, but the obvious starters are L'Jarius Sneed, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., and Roger McCreary. Roger McCreary in a contract year, L'Jarius Sneed in a pivotal year for his contract, as the Titans can save a lot of money if they let him go next offseason. We have done an extensive look at L'Jarius Sneed already. We talked about him pretty in depth when we did our positional rankings video. We did a full mini-sode on L'Jarius Sneed himself, so we're not going to spend a lot of time there. We've shared our thoughts on L'Jarius Sneed. If you missed those, I encourage you to go find those videos. And then Jarvis Brownlee Jr. was a rookie 5th round pick last year who I think exceeded basically all expectations for a rookie 5th rounder. He was thrown into the fire because of L'Jarius Sneed's injury. Those are your starters. No question about it, right, Justin?
Yeah, no, of course there's no question about it. Again, the if healthy tag being a really meaningful one there, specifically in relation to L'Jarius Sneed. But it's funny. I've talked a lot about this room this offseason, whether here on the radio at titansize.com. And the one player I decided recently, I've written about so many players this offseason at Titan Size. It's summer content. You're just thinking about storylines, guys you could write up on. I had a storyline that I wanted to write the other day, and the idea came to me first, which is weird, but the headline came to me, and the player came second. And I said, who? And I had written about so many guys already this offseason, didn't want to repeat myself. And then I said, I haven't written about Jarvis Brownlee Jr. this offseason. And you know what? People aren't talking about Jarvis Brownlee Jr. enough in this fan base, in my opinion. And the story did phenomenally for me, by the way. I published it over the weekend, and like more than 15,000 of you have read that story over the weekend. I cannot wait to watch Jarvis Brownlee Jr. this year. Like, maybe it's just me, but I really feel like no one's talked about him enough in this market. Like, as you said, it was a steal last year as a 5th round pick, thrown into the fire, not only because of L'Jarius Sneed's injury, because of Chido Awuzie as well. Both their starting corners were hurt for the majority of the year. So he enters the lineup. I thought he played really well, all things considered. He was whistled for a bit more penalties than you'd like to see, a bit grabby, a bit physical. That was his calling card coming out of college. We talked about it. He's physical. Well, sometimes that leads to penalties. He's got to work on that. That's a technique thing, right? Like, you start mastering your technique, the whistle goes away a little bit. So there are things, and he gave up some things through the air, some touchdowns, again, thrown into the fire. He was operating essentially as their number 1 guy. So he's covering some of the best receivers in the NFL. That's a tall task for a 5th round rookie. So, but all things considered, I thought he played really well. And he's one of those guys that strikes me as someone who's going to get a lot better as a sophomore and moving forward. Like, we're talking about L'Jarius Sneed, if he's going to be here. 2026, there's a good chance Jarvis Brownlee's their number 1 corner. And I won't get into this right now, but this position group in general, there's an underrated chance that this is the team's 1st round pick in 2026. Now, I wouldn't put it number 1, edge, wide receiver. We're going to keep talking about those probably throughout, September, October, and so on, especially edge. But I think corner might be third likeliest if I had to project right now, based on, McCreary in a contract year and Sneed's, injury upside, if you will. But Jarvis Brownlee, that's the one I really wanted to start this episode with, because I'm kind of shocked how under-discussed he's been this offseason. In a market where we're all looking for things to talk about right now, that's the football landscape in, late June, early July, once minicamp wraps up. And Jarvis Brownlee, can't wait to watch him this season.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because he's probably got the best chance of any day 3 pick currently on the Titans roster to really vault themselves into like quality starter. And I think quality starter, is that too much to say about how he performed as a rookie? Like, I think he was almost a quality starter.
I think,
yeah.
He didn't get you killed, right? But I don't want to there were some struggles, there were some penalties, some gains and stuff through the air. He didn't get you killed. And there were some really impressive pass breakups. There was an interception or two, one or two. I think it was just one, but there's an interception or two, a couple really impressive PBUs on tape. I'm not ready to quite say that he was a quality starter yet. He didn't get you killed. He filled in very admirably, but I think the sky's the limit for him going forward. I really do.
And that's the thing about having a rookie year where you surpass expectations. As a 5th round pick, you have very low expectations. But as some players like to say, that sets the standard. That's the standard now. So if he takes a step back for whatever reason, we're going to view it as a major disappointment because of what he did last year. So now the pressure is on for him. Can he take that next step? And he's got a great, defensive coordinator coach in Denard Wilson to help him get to that next step. And I think that that's kind of the key to unlocking this Titans defense, which, statistically performed better than expected last year. But then you dive into those numbers a little bit. They were terrible in the red zone. They gave up so many touchdowns per drive compared to the league average, despite not giving up that many yards. And obviously the special teams issues played into why there simply weren't as many yards to give up. So I think with the lack of a true pass rush that we expect to see from the Titans this season, that puts a lot more pressure on the cornerback group. So we had this group ranked 8th out of 10 position groups on the Titans, and I just wonder how much room there is for them to be better than that. Can this unit turn into a strength of the team? And let's finish going through, this positional overview here because... Can I quickly
say something I'll add one final note about Jarvis Brownlee Jr.
Sure.
To properly sort of summarize what he was up against last year. He played more snaps than any defender.
On the Titans?
More snaps than any defender on the Titans. 913 last year, okay? Pro Football Focus had him giving up 55 catches on 81 targets, 663 yards, 4 touchdowns. Coverage grade was 55.9, That was 16th best among rookie corners. But I think to properly conceptualize that, if you will, only 3 rookies played more snaps than him at corner, and they were all drafted significantly earlier than he. We're talking first-round picks. We're the only 3 rookie corners in the league that played more snaps than he did. So they asked him to do so much. I talked about the penalties earlier. There was 9 total infractions he was whistled for. That was tied for 11th most among corners. So you'd like to see that number come down a little bit. But he was around the ball consistently, 75 tackles, 9 pass breakups, the 1 interception that I mentioned. So core member of the Titans defense last year, hopefully a core member moving forward.
Yeah, he's a guy that you can see developing into, a true good cornerback, someone that you can rely on the defense, and maybe the ceiling is higher. We'll see if that is the case. Darrell Baker Jr. is another guy in this room. He was him and Jarvis Brownlee Jr. were the first guys up last year when injuries happened. You mentioned L'Jarius Sneed and Chido Awuzie getting hurt. So those 2 guys thrust into the lineup. Darrell Baker Jr. was a guy they claimed off waivers right before the season started. He was, not really expected to be in any team's plans for the 2024 season. And the Titans said, come on in, we'll make a spot for you. And he played pretty good football for them, all things considered. Again, I don't want this to sound like the Titans had a lockdown secondary and Darrell Baker Jr. was out there looking like Darrell Revis, but he played well, all things considered. And again, expectations play a huge part in how we evaluate how these guys played. But expectations were low, and I think he played pretty well. The question for me is Darrell Baker Jr. still that number 4 guy, that first off the bench guy now that Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is a starter? Or is there someone else in this room that we're about to talk through that can take that spot? 6th round pick Marcus Harris, obviously in the conversation. Titans signed a veteran journeyman. This, I think, is his 7th year in the NFL. Amani Oruwariye. He doesn't have a ton of starting experience, but he has started a few seasons worth of games, but over 7 years, obviously he hasn't been a starter that whole time. Gabe Judy Lawley was an undrafted free agent last year, a local guy out of Tennessee. And then the 4 UDFAs this year, Jalen Kimber, Clarence Lewis, Davion Ross, Jamari Harris. So I want to ask you in a little bit, we'll get there in a bit, to tell us a little more about these UDFAs. We did a UDFA episode where we talked about all these guys, but that was a couple of months ago now. So some of our audience may have missed that one or just forgotten. So we'll go through those 4 guys in a second. And I'm also going to ask you which UDFA has the best chance to make the roster. But let's go back to the top here because we know who the top 4 corners are. You say Marcus Harris is basically a lock to make the roster. So top 5 corners. The rest of this group is all going to be competing. And I think it's truly an open competition depends on how many corners they keep. I think they could keep anywhere from 5 to 7. So there could be 1 or 2 spots up for grabs here amongst this jumble of 6 guys, 5 UDFAs, including 1 last year, and the free agent who is a veteran. But that's the overview. That's the overview of the position. That's Jarvis Brownlee Jr. in his role. The other big name in this room, obviously L'Jarius Sneed, I mentioned we're not going to go deep on him because we've talked about him a lot, is Roger McCreary. Roger McCreary, entering a contract year, has been pretty much a stalwart in the Titans secondary since the day he was drafted. Started a bunch of games as a rookie, started almost every game since then, with the exception of minor injuries here and there. But he's been a dependable player. He's been pretty reliable and tough in terms of the injury proneness. I wouldn't classify him as injury prone at all. In fact, the opposite. Not that he's never dealt with anything, but I think he's one of the more dependable players on the roster. The question is, he's your starting nickelback, right? Because Jarvis Brownlee Jr. and L'Jarius Sneed are going to play on the outside. If L'Jarius Sneed is, invisible again, Darrell Baker Jr. plays on the outside and McCreary stays in the slot. What does McCreary have to do you think, to get another contract with the Tennessee Titans? Is that something that could happen in the next month or two? Or is this going to be, he's a previous regime guy, we have to wait and see how he fits with this new regime and what they want to do with the money and everything? And what kind of contract would Roger McCreary, as mostly a isolated to nickelback, what would he kind of command on the open market?
I'm going to take it back a little because you talked so much there and you didn't give me an opportunity to jump in. So I'm going to do it myself. I want to quickly add a note about Darrell Baker Jr. You were talking about him acceptable. In case anyone thought we were biased, and you added that note, I'm glad you did. We don't want to make it tell the Titans how to shut down secondary, yada, yada. What were they dealing with, right? The injury to Sneed, the injury to Oruwariye. You got a waiver claim starting outside in Darrell Baker. You got a 5th-round rookie starting outside in Jarvis Brownlee. Season-ending injury to starting safety Quandre Diggs, who you entered the year with. Titans finished second best in passing yards allowed last year in the entire NFL. They allowed 177.3 passing yards per game. And it's not like, they were terrible against the run. Everyone's running the football against them. They had a bottom 10 run defense. It wasn't great, but they weren't bottom 5, right? It's not like everyone's, we're going to run for 200-something yards on them and just not pass the ball. All things considered, Darrell Baker was another guy that was really good. And anytime the new regime comes in and you re-sign a guy, they re-signed a couple of guys only. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Darrell Baker Jr., James Lynch, Sebastian Joseph Day, all guys that played well for them in spurts last year that Mike Borgonzi decided to re-sign. They let a lot of guys walk. So it says a lot about Darrell Baker Jr. Now I'll get to your question about Roger McCreary. I think the contract, the extension terms are probably, there was a really good one this past offseason that gives you an idea of what he's going to ask for, in my opinion. I don't know if it's more or less Titans fans think of. The Bears signed Kyler Gordon. I'm gonna look it up real quick because I wrote an article on it at the time. Kyler Gordon is very similar to Roger McCreary in the sense where he was drafted in the same year. He was drafted in the same range as Roger McCreary. He is a nickel-only corner. There is no doubt about it, just like Roger McCreary. He signed a 3-year, $40 million deal. So more than $12 million a year, less than 15. I don't know what's that average, around 13 and a half, give or take. Yeah. That's the neighborhood Roger McCreary probably finds himself in, right? I don't think you can make an argument that Kyler Gordon is way better than Roger McCreary. You might be able to say he's a little bit better, but I think McCreary's getting at least $12 million, minimum on an extension, whether it's here or in free agency. So that's the type of deal that I think McCreary gets. It's 3 years, 12 to 15 million per season. What does he got to do this year? I don't think they're going to sign him to an extension before this year. No, I know you kind of threw that question into that question as well. No, I think they probably let him play out the year. We're still learning Mike Borgonzi, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
They drafted a lot of corners in KC and sometimes they traded L'Jarius Sneed when they couldn't afford him, right? Like a bit replaceable. They kind of treated that position. They've had so much success drafting day 3 corners, that franchise has, while Mike Borgonzi was there. I'm like, you'd be kidding if anyone has a clue on what they're going to do in Roger McCreary. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I could see him having a good season, good to great season, and they still let him walk based on the price tag and based on what they feel is a replaceable position, being nickel corner. So
Right.
I'm a big fan of Roger McCreary. If he has a great year, I hope they keep him around. But I'm not naive enough to say with any certainty that even if he's great, that they will. I don't know.
Yeah, I do think he needs to be better than last year, at least from a production standpoint. So
Agreed.
he played 15 games last year, had just 1 pass breakup, according to Pro Football Reference, no interceptions. He did have a career high 12 tackles for loss, mixing up in the run game there as the nickelback. But the season before that, he had 1 interception in each of the previous 2 seasons. He had 6 pass deflections the season before last and 8 pass deflections as a rookie. So he's trending down in that direction. Not that that means anything. He did play all 17 games his rookie year and only played 15 each of the past 2 seasons. So I'd like to see him healthy for 17 games, but I will take 15 gladly. I just like to see a little more ball production. He doesn't have to get interceptions, but he should be breaking passes up. He's always right there. But something we've been talking about with McCreary since he was a rookie is his little T-Rex arms, his little short T-Rex arms. He can't necessarily get all the way around a wide receiver's body and get his hand in there because he just doesn't have that length. But he is a feisty physical corner. He's always in great position. He doesn't give up a lot of yards after catch. Smart player, great tackler. He has a ton of great attributes that I think make him a very solid, good player. I don't know that he's great. He's definitely above average, and he's one of the few, I would say, guaranteed quality starters on the Titans defense heading into 2025. There might be more that emerge, but as far as guaranteed quality goes, Roger McCreary is up there for me. Is there anything else you want to say about these top 4 guys before we get into the rest of the group?
So the one question I want to pose, and then I'll get into 2 separate topics. I'll get into rapid fire at the end. Marcus Harris. The reason I call him a lock is the staff loves him. I'm comfortable calling him a lock. The staff have been so impressed with him. Rookie mini camp, mandatory camp, OTAs. Super impressed with this kid. I think there's a chance they think they've got another, late round steal in Marcus Harris. Maybe L'Jarius Sneed notwithstanding. I'm going to pose this in a certain way. The most notable question in this room that isn't getting attention right. I guess I don't have to say L'Jarius Sneed notwithstanding, because the most notable question in this room that's not getting attention right now, but I think will be the most notable throughout the year, is Marcus Harris or Darrell Baker, first man up. No team makes it through a season unscathed at cornerback. It's impossible, especially when you play 3 of them so frequently. You're not getting all 3 of them healthy for 17 games. Is it Marcus Harris or is it Darrell Baker Jr. that's first man up? Baker's not going to be handed anything. He had a good year, yes, but he's a veteran guy. He's a veteran journeyman, so to speak. Was a guy that's already been cut at final cuts by his previous team. And he was not healthy, by the way, throughout OTAs and minicamp. Wasn't on the field. That hurt him a little bit. While as Marcus Harris was endearing himself to the coaching staff. So, and the other 2 part of that question, maybe we know this already, but I don't think we do. We'll find out more at training camp. Harris, some versatility. Nickel, boundary, both. Where do they see him primarily playing? That'll also help answer that question, right? Because I don't really believe that there are a lot of guys out there that can do both at a high level. Like especially a 6th round rookie, he should either be backing up Roger McCreary or he should be backing up the boundary. And which one of that is will play a role in how and when or if he gets on the field.
I do think that's how the initial depth chart will shake out, is you'll have the 3 starters we talked about. Darrell Baker's first guy off the bench on the outside, Marcus Harris first guy off the bench at the nickel spot. And it could be a situation where, Darrell Baker is actually not the first guy off the bench, but Roger McCreary bumps out and Marcus Harris jumps in at the nickel spot and Darrell Baker stays on the bench unless someone else gets hurt. But I don't expect that. I think, if somebody gets hurt on the outside, Darrell Baker plays.
McCreary once upon a time, and it didn't go well, if I recall correctly. Yeah. So I'd be surprised. I think they'll have enough faith. I think they'll have enough faith in like Darrell Baker Jr. or Marcus Harris that won't happen.
Yeah. So that's how I see that playing out is, Marcus Harris is your backup nickel. Darrell Baker's your backup on the outside. Now we have 6 other guys in this room. Obviously, the veteran status of Amani Oruwariye sort of separates him from the other five guys, but does it separate him enough? Like, is he in the lead for the last possible roster spot in this room if that's how they decide, if they keep six guys just because he's a veteran, or do they take a chance on the developmental upside of one of the young guys? Obviously, Gabe Jeudy-Lally did something right because he stuck around as a UDFA to the point where he's back in the mix this year. And then you have four other undrafted free agents. Like, of these six guys, is there one that stands above the rest as like more likely to take that sixth spot?
That's tough for me. So if you don't mind, I'll just run through rapid fire on the six guys if I can. So Amani Oruwariye, who you just talked about there, is the vet of the group. He's entering his seventh year, bit of a veteran journeyman. Fifth round pick in 2019, previously of the Detroit Lions. 40 career NFL starts. This is a lot of experience under his belt. Here's the most random stat you may ever hear. 6 interceptions in 2021. Was like third in the NFL at one point in interceptions that season. Came back the next year, only started 5 games. So I don't want you to this is one of those things where like, this is maybe too extreme of an example. Remember like Trayvon Diggs on the Cowboys a few years ago, where like he was getting a lot of interceptions, but he was also kind of getting cooked in coverage if it wasn't an interception. Like, this is a more extreme example of that because Amani Oruwariye was getting cooked.
I got an example for you. Parrish Cox, when he played for the Titans, was like a guy that was he was consistently getting burned, but then he would come up with like game-clinching final drive interceptions multiple times throughout the season, and it was like, oh, there we go. That's the Titans win because Parrish Cox just picked off Matthew Stafford against the Lions. Like, where the hell did that come from? Amazing. But like, ultimately, he was so bad that he wasn't even back the next season.
So that's who this guy is, right? Like, after that season, 6 interceptions in 2021, he only started 5 games the following year, and that was his final year in Detroit. He played out his rookie deal, and he's had a hard time sticking anywhere since. He's been in Jacksonville, Dallas. I think there was one more team. He was in Dallas last year for a bit with Bones Fossil, the new special teams coach. I don't think that plays a role because he only played I think it was like 20-something special team snaps. So didn't do much. Actually played more on defense for the Cowboys. I think it was like 250 snaps as a boundary corner. So he's got the experience advantage going into camp. But I'll run through some of the UDFAs. Clarence Lewis played good ball at Notre Dame and Syracuse. Everyone plays at multiple programs nowadays. 31 career PBUs for him. He's got good size, about 5'11", 200 pounds. Why'd he go undrafted, Justin? Well, he tested really poorly. 4.52 in the 40. Not terrible, but not good. What was really awful was a historically bad 29-inch vertical and a 9-foot broad jump. So, again, played some good ball on tape. I thought he was going to be a safety convert when I watched him throughout. I interviewed him over at the Draft Network throughout the pre-draft process. I thought he was going to be a safety. Guess Titans are keeping him at corner. Jalen Kimber, 3 different programs. This always blows me away. Enough talent to go to Georgia, Florida, and Penn State. That's absolutely wild. In my opinion, when you're playing at 3 different programs like that, I wish you stuck at one of them because you're constantly changing. You're starting the developmental phase all over again. I think that really hurt Jalen Kimber. I interviewed him as well. Went undrafted when I thought he was a draftable talent, but never got any consistency throughout his career. Titans met with him at East-West Shrine. He was down there. Remember, they sent the gauntlet because Shador Sanders was down there. Good size on Jalen Kimber, 6 foot 190. Reportedly ran a 4.39 at Penn State's Pro Day. Jermani Harris, this is the most intriguing one in my opinion by far. 27 career starts at Iowa, 8 interceptions and 27 pass breakups in a 2-year sample size. So 2-year starter. In those 2 years alone, 8 interceptions, 27 PBUs. Had a couple of off-field issues. There was one that was quite peculiar. I think it had to do with gambling, allegedly, if I'm recalling correctly. That contributed to him going undrafted. Great size for that spot, 6 foot 190. The final UDFA, I can see you looking that up in the background, I have a feeling, the Jermani Harris thing. The final UDFA here, Davion Ross. I'm going to tell you what, one advantage he might have, he's the only nickel, in my opinion. The other 3 UDFAs I talked about, they're all competing with Gabe Jeudy-Lally and Amani Oruwariye for that boundary spot. They're all like 5'11", 6 foot, 200 pounds. Davion Ross got a different body type altogether, 5'10", 175. Bit of a local guy, played at Memphis and East Kentucky college ball. I think he had an interception at minicamp. I remember seeing that of one of the better quarterbacks there. 14 pass breakups last year. That's great ball production at a local program. Also in the kick return mix, got great experience returning kicks in college. So that adds another layer to the Davion Ross discussion. I'm rambling. Not a whole lot to say about Gabe Jeudy-Lally. Second-year UDFA, as you said, they liked him enough to keep him here on the 90-man roster. Out of this group, he's the only one that's a returning player. And he got into a little bit of action. So perhaps that gives him a leg up going into camp. Amani Oruwariye, again, 40 career starts, has the experience advantage. If I had to pick one UDFA, because that was the last part of your question, I go with Jermani Harris out of Iowa. Love the size, love the experience at a blue blood program, and love the production. And he's fairly athletic too. So he's the one I'm by far most intrigued by.
Out of the 4 UDFAs or out of the 6 guys in this bottom half group?
I'm gonna, you know what, more so out of the 4 UDFAs, but I'll go with both. I'm gonna lay my claim to the Jermani Harris hype because I'm so intrigued by him.
Well, Jermani Harris, I did look it up while you were talking there. He faced a few issues. So he had an OWI.
There's 2 issues at least, if I recall.
Yeah, I'm going to call it 3, actually. So there was an OWI charge, which I don't know what OWI is because I live in Texas and I lived in California and we don't have that here. But it's essentially the same as a DUI, but for the state of Iowa, they call it OWI, operating while intoxicated. So that's not, something that you want to see, but he's a college kid. It happens, like I'm sure plenty of our listeners it's happened to. It's happened to friends of mine, luckily not me, but I definitely have gotten away with it, when I was a young, immature, idiotic kid. So I'll let that pass as, he's young and whatever. He also did have suspensions related to a gambling investigation.
Yes.
He also, and this isn't a big deal, he dealt with an ankle injury at points, missed spring practice in 2024 due to a surgery. And then the big one to me that, it is what it is, whatever. He opted out of the remainder of last season in November to start preparing for the NFL draft. Kids do this, college kids do this all the time to prepare for the NFL draft.
A little weird when you're late pick, right?
When you're not a first round pick and you're opting out in November and there's still season left and not just one meaningless bowl game, that's just a little eyebrow raising. And
you're playing at Iowa, right? Like you're playing in big games, important games. And
then to go undrafted after that, like you focus on the draft process to not even be part of the draft process is a little. So there's definitely maybe some character immaturity stuff here that could play a role. But if he ends up, if it clicks for him that I'm a professional now and I need to take this seriously, and he happens to be the most talented guy in the room too, in terms of the bottom 6 players we've been talking about, then I could definitely see the path for him to finally getting his priorities right and doing this thing. But I do think that, he missed key developmental time with the suspensions, with a couple minor injuries that he's dealt with, and then just not playing for the final, I don't know how many games, but the end of last season. Those are roadblocks to his development and potentially why he didn't get drafted. But I kind of agree with you that he's probably got the best shot just because I think, and I don't want to scout the helmet over the player, but Iowa produces high-level defensive backs. They've done it for years and years and years. They have a good coaching system. They have a good scheme that they run that gets the most out of these players. And Amani Hooker was an Iowa defensive back who has panned out in the NFL. So if I had to just put it on somebody in this group, that's the guy I'm putting it on. But I do think, let's transition and close this out with our roster projection. I do think the Titans probably end up keeping 6. And I'm going to ask you now, because you wrote an article, this is a few weeks now, mid-June when you wrote this, projecting out the 53-man roster way in advance. You kept 6 cornerbacks, the obvious 5 that we called locks, and Gabe Jeudy-Lally was your sixth. So has something changed where you now are picking Jermani Harris? Is it just because we're recording a podcast and you forgot that you picked Gabe Jeudy-Lally?
No, I probably flipped the coin. Yeah, I feel like this could go so many different ways. I'm going to say the ones that have an the best chance are Jermani Harris, Amani Oruwariye, and Gabe Jeudy-Lally. I'd probably put those 3 above the other 3. Although I can see Clarence Lewis being a great special teams player. For example, I know him well, and I know a lot about him. He could be a great special teams player. Jalen Kimber's obviously got some talent playing at 3 big programs. Davion Ross could get into the kick return mix, and if they feel Marcus Harris isn't a nickel and they need another nickel, Davion Ross is the only. So you can formulate the pathway in your mind,
And with Clarence Lewis, there's also a potential path to him sneaking into the back end as a safety, because you mentioned that was how you kind of viewed him coming out, and we're not 100% sure how the Titans view him, and they may like him as a versatile guy the same way they like Corey Levin as a guard center.
I interviewed Clarence Lewis as a safety, okay? I must have been advised that was going to be the case. I asked him if there are any safeties he'd compare himself to at the next level, He could have corrected me. No, he said, I love watching Minka Fitzpatrick, love watching his game. I was teammates with Kyle Hamilton at Notre Dame, watch his tape and learn a lot about him. Like, I asked him a ton about playing safety. So if I have an inkling, and normally you wouldn't get this information, I'm going to guess his representation thought he was going to go through this process as a safety. And when the Titans signed him, maybe they were in the minority and said, we actually like you as a corner.
Yeah,
that would
it's
be
interesting.
my guess right now.
And I mean, again, I could see him playing both roles in training camp as they try to find, the best way to use him and see if there's a path for him to making the roster, especially if they view him as like a guy who could be a core special teamer. But ultimately, I think 6 guys make the roster, and I do think it's the 5 we talked about and one of probably the other 3 that you mentioned. So I do think, the training camp, I think training camp will determine it. There's some positions that we're about to talk about, later this week and next week, that it's kind of like, this is the group that's making the team. And maybe there's an outside shot that somebody else takes the last spot in this position group. But for this position, I think it's open, that 5th and 6th potentially spots are more open than some other positions. So, we can preview it and talk about all the pathways we want here, but it's really going to come down to what happens in July and August and who stands out and makes the most of their opportunity. And that's sort of how we have to just wrap up the cornerback position.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a bloodbath. Training camp, preseason reps will be really important because you're not going to see L'Jarius Sneed in preseason, if at all, right? Probably not at all. I don't think you need to see a lot of Roger McCreary. I don't even think you got to see a lot of Jarvis Brownlee in preseason. So yeah, a lot of Marcus Harris, maybe a little bit of Darrell Baker, probably, maybe a lot of Darrell Baker, actually, a lot of Marcus Harris, a lot of Darrell Baker. And then the other 6, those are going to be your 8 corners probably in the preseason.
Yeah, so that'll do it. We previewed the cornerback position. We're gearing up for training camp, Justin. Tomorrow, we're talking wide receivers. Ooh. Friday, we've got interior defensive line. And then we're doing 5 more of these next week, coming out, starting Sunday night/Monday with the offensive line. And we'll close the series out next Friday with the quarterback group, as by then, we will be a few days away from the players reporting for training camp. So I'm getting really excited for this series. I want to shout out Sinkers Beverages right here on the screen. Sinkers Beverages, they have their 40th birthday jamboree coming up Saturday, August 9th, 5:30 p.m. Tickets are only $10. That comes with 2 free drinks. As I've said before on the show, that's basically the price of admission right there. 2 free drinks for $10 ticket admission. $10 ticket entry there. So check it out. The link in the podcast description. Get your tickets to Sinker's 40th birthday jamboree. You don't want to miss that. Support a good cause, the Martha K. O'Brien Center in East Nashville. And check out Justin's book if you haven't got it already. It's right here behind me on the shelf. It's up there-ish on Justin's screen too. So that link also in the podcast description. Check it out. We'll be back tomorrow again talking wide receivers. So until then, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.